Hello. I don't know how to start. Hello. So this year for Halloween, I've decided that I want to be a witch. And I know what you're all thinking. Wow, how very basic. But I've never been a witch for Halloween before, so I'm pretty excited to put together such a classic Halloween costume. The only problem being I want a very specific witch hat, but I cannot find it anywhere. So I'm gonna try to make one. We'll see how it goes.
First, I measured around my head to get the sizing for my head hole, and then I made a dunce hat out of parcel paper for the cone of the hat. I traced out a better pattern on some more of the same paper, cut it out, and pinned it together to try it on. This was when I realized I'd be needing some sort of stiff inner lining to make sure the hat wasn't so droopy and pathetic. I used some stiff felt for the lining and an old curtain for the showy fabric, both found at the thrift store. After pinning my brim pattern to the felt, I cut the whole shape out. I also cut the inner circle for my head hole while it was all still pinned together. And I made sure to double up my fabric before cutting so I could get two identical pieces of brim lining, and I just glue gunned those two pieces together to strengthen the brim a bit more. Once that was done, I pinned and cut out the cone lining, and I only cut out one piece of fabric for that. Then I pinned all my pieces together to see how it fit and decided that I'd need wire to help get the brim exactly how I wanted it. After getting changed into some PJs, I got to sewing the cone lining with a nice strong backstitch. Unfortunately, my sister's sewing machine is broken, so I had to hand stitch the whole hat together, but hey, an excuse to watch Addams Family reruns while sewing, am I right? Once I finished that, I splayed out my showy fabric, my, wait, what's that actually called? Fashion fabric. Thanks, Google. Anyway, I pinned my brim pattern to the fashion fabric and traced the pattern onto the side of the fabric that wouldn't be showing once the hat was sewn together, or the wrong side of the fabric, as the pros call it. Then I got the cat out of the way of what I thought were very sharp fabric scissors so I could cut out my brim. And as it turns out, these scissors were absolute garbage, so I got some pinking shears instead, and those worked out great. I made sure to leave plenty of room for seam allowance because, let's be honest, can we really trust our own hands? Just look at them. So I cut out two of the circular brim pieces and pinned them right sides together. Then I used a back stitch around the outer edge of the circle.
I literally just broke a needle. Hand sewing.
Using some sharp, normal scissors, I cut out the head hole from my newly stitched brim, unpinned the opening, and turned the brim inside out so I could test out the fit of the lining before adding the shaping wire. Once that was done, I pinned the cone pattern to the fashion fabric and traced out the shape, and cut it, again leaving a hefty seam allowance. Then it was back to stitching with that handy-dandy backstitch. I folded the cone in half with the right sides together, and then sewed it along the side opening, but not the head hole opening, as that would be stupid. Then I cut off the excess seam allowance and turned it all right side out. I stuffed the lining cone inside with the stitch line of the fashion fabric and the lining fabric lined up, then used a backstitch to sew them together along that stitch line to keep the new stitches hidden. The next day, I acquired some copper wire for the brim of my hat. I ended up measuring out the perimeter of the brim with the wire, then doubling it up and twisting it so that it would hold its shape better. And once I got the wire in a somewhat circular shape, I stitched it to the lining of the brim every few inches. I made sure that the end of the wire was twisted tightly into a loop so that it wouldn't poke through the fashion fabric once the hat was all sewn together. And the brim naturally made a sort of Elphaba from Wicked swoopy shape that I really liked, so I pinned the cone to the brim to get the full effect, and, to hold it together while sewing. I, not so surprisingly, used a backstitch to hold the brim and the cone together initially, then mixed things up with a whip stitch to further strengthen that bond, and to get all the seam allowances tamed. Most people like to hide all of the sewing for this on the inside of the head hole, but I was lazy and tired and knew I was going to be covering all the ugly stitches with a big ribbon anyway, so I just left it as is. I used a helpful porg to support my hat while I pinned the ribbon in place and tied the bow. I decided to twist the ribbon at the front of the hat to give it a cool V shape and also to help it lie flat on the conical shape of the cone. I then carefully burnt the edges of the ribbon to stop it from fraying and found some thread that matched my ribbon so I could secure it to the hat where I pinned it earlier, again using some cleverly placed back stitches so it looked as seamless as possible. And with that, the hat was done.